Good evening. Tonight, we're leaving behind the rush of the modern world. No glowing phone screens, no traffic, no deadlines waiting for tomorrow morning. Instead, we'll travel more than 1,000 years into the past to a quiet farming settlement on the edge of a Norwegian fjord during the early 10th century. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. I always enjoy seeing how many different corners of the world gather together for these peaceful journeys through history. Now, if you're comfortable, settle into your favorite sleeping position. Pull your blanket a little closer if the room feels cool. Dim the lights if you haven't already, and simply let the story carry you away. Our journey tonight isn't about legendary Viking warriors charging into battle. There will be no roaring longships crossing stormy seas, no kings seeking glory, no heroic sagas, because in truth, those stories belong to only a small number of people. Most Scandinavians never sailed across the ocean to raid distant kingdoms. Most never carried famous swords. Most never became legendary. Instead, they farmed, they planted barley beneath an uncertain northern sky. They mended wooden fences after long winters. They milked goats before sunrise. They worried about the coming harvest. They laughed with their children. They buried loved ones. They watched seasons change across the mountains year after year. In many ways, their lives were surprisingly familiar, and perhaps that's what makes them so fascinating. Tonight, you'll spend an entire day as one of those ordinary people. Not a king, not a warrior, not a hero, simply a Viking farmer. Our story takes place sometime around the year 900. Historians cannot point to one exact village where this day unfolded. Instead, it is a careful reconstruction built from archaeological discoveries, preserved buildings, ancient tools, pollen trapped beneath old soil, animal bones, fragments of clothing, and the quiet clues left behind by people who rarely imagined that anyone, 1,000 years later, would wonder how they lived. Whenever the evidence is uncertain, I'll tell you, whenever historians disagree, we'll take the most widely accepted view. Because history is often less about absolute certainty and more about patiently piecing together countless small fragments of the past. Take one slow breath. Imagine the air becoming colder. The scent of pine replaces the smell of your room. A salty breeze drifts inland from the sea. Somewhere in the darkness, waves gently lap against smooth stones. Above you, stars fill a sky untouched by city lights. The year is 900. Electricity has not yet been imagined. There are no clocks ticking on bedside tables, no engines, no airplanes overhead. Only wind, water animals, fire, and people. Far ahead, barely visible beneath the fading stars, a handful of buildings rest quietly against the landscape. Their roofs seem almost part of the earth itself, covered in thick layers of grass that have grown through the seasons. Then ribbons of smoke curl upward into the cool night air. This is home, not a castle, not a city, just a small farming community, where perhaps 20 or 30 people live together, bound by family, friendship, and necessity. Around the settlement stand low wooden fences, built as much to keep wandering animals inside as hungry predators outside. Beyond them stretch rough fields scattered with stones. This is difficult land to farm. Long ago, great glaciers carved these valleys, leaving behind rocky soil that demands endless patience. Every spring, more stones seem to appear. Every year, someone must carry them away. To the south, dark forests climb steep hillsides, pine, birch, spruce. They provide timber for houses, fuel for fires, and game for hunters fortunate enough to find it. To the north lies the fjord, calm tonight. Its waters reflect the stars so clearly that sea and sky seem almost joined together. The ocean is both friend and danger. It brings fish, trade, visitors, but it also brings storms powerful enough to destroy boats in moments. Many people imagine Viking life as constant adventure, yet most days were wonderfully ordinary. There were fences to repair, bread to bake, Animals to feed, shows to patch, wood to split. Life was shaped not by dramatic battles, but by quiet routines repeated across generations. Those routines made survival possible. Without farmers, there would have been no famous voyages. Without harvests, there would have been no warriors. Without ordinary families, there would have been no Viking age. Tonight, we'll walk beside those families. We'll wake with them before dawn. We'll share their meals. We'll work their fields. We'll rest beside their fire. And perhaps, by the time night returns once more, you'll see the Viking world not as a place of endless violence, but as a landscape filled with ordinary people living extraordinary lives, simply because history remembered them by only one small part of who they truly were. As our eyes adjust to the darkness, one building slowly becomes clearer than the others. It is longer than you expected, perhaps 25 meters from one end to the other. Its walls are built from sturdy oak posts, packed with woven branches and clay to keep out the bitter winter wind. The roof, thick with turf and grass, insulates the family below through the freezing Scandinavian winters. This is a longhouse. Inside, several generations sleep beneath the same roof. Grandparents, Pockrant's children, perhaps an unmarried aunt, a visiting cousin, even a trusted farmhand. Privacy, as we know it today, barely exists. Life is shared, warmth is shared, work is shared, and sometimes grief is shared as well. Near one end of the building, a few sheep rest quietly behind a wooden partition. Their body heat helps warm the house through the coldest months. To modern ears, the idea may sound unusual. To a Viking family, it was simply practical. Nothing was wasted, nothing was taken for granted. The fire at the center of the hall has burned low during the night. Only glowing embers remain. Thin trails of smoke drift upward through an opening in the roof before disappearing into the darkness outside. The smell of wood smoke clings to everything: the walls, the clothing, the blankets, even the hair of those sleeping nearby. Archaeologists have found evidence that many Viking homes remained smoky for much of the day. Though it might seem unpleasant now, that smoke helped preserve the wooden beams, discouraged insects, and even cured meat hung high above the fire. Outside, the eastern horizon begins almost imperceptibly to lighten. Morning is approaching, not because a clock announces it, but because nature always keeps its own time. Soon, the first member of the household will wake. Soon, the fire will be coaxed back to life. Soon, another ordinary day will begin, and you will be there to witness every quiet moment. But for just a little while longer, everything remains still. The sheep breathe softly, the embers glow faintly, the fjord beyond the walls rests beneath a pale sky, and history itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for the first footsteps of morning. The world is still wrapped in darkness. Only the faintest hint of blue touches the eastern horizon, where mountains rise like silent guardians above the fjord. Inside the longhouse, the warmth of the previous evening's fire has almost disappeared. The glowing embers at the center of the room pulse softly beneath a blanket of white ash, their orange light gently flickering across the rough wooden walls. No one has spoken for hours. The only sounds are quiet breathing, the occasional rustle of wool blankets, and somewhere near the far end of the hall, a sheep shifts its weight before settling once more. If you were expecting a peaceful silence, you might be surprised. A Viking longhouse was never completely quiet. Timber creaked as it adjusted to the cool night air. The wind whispered beneath the thick turf roof. A dog, curled near the doorway, occasionally twitched in its sleep. Even the fire seemed alive, giving a gentle sigh each time a glowing ember collapsed into ash. These were the sounds of home. No clocks marked the passing of time. No church bells echoed across the valley. Instead, the people who lived here trusted something far older, their own bodies and the rhythm of nature. For generations, they had learned to wake when the world itself began to stir, very slowly, Someone moves. It is not you. It is the oldest woman in the household. Perhaps she is a grandmother. Perhaps she has seen 60 winters, an impressive age in this part of the world. Years of hard work have bent her back slightly, but experience has taught her something the younger members of the family have not yet mastered. She knows exactly how to wake without disturbing everyone else. Carefully, she pulls a thick wool blanket around her shoulders. The air is cold enough that each breath forms a faint mist. She kneels beside the fire pit. For a few quiet moments, she simply watches the embers. There is still life hiding beneath the ash. Good. That means no one will need to start a new fire from scratch. To a modern family, relighting a fire might seem like a small inconvenience. To a Viking household, losing the night's fire could mean spending precious time and energy creating another one with flint, steel, and dry tinder. Keeping the embers alive through the night was a daily habit, passed from one generation to the next. Using a carved piece of wood, she gently pushes aside the ash. Tiny sparks appear. She adds a handful of dried moss, then a few thin twigs gathered the previous afternoon. Nothing happens. She waits patiently. History often rewards patience. A tiny thread of smoke begins to rise. Another moment passes, then a single flame appears, small, fragile, almost shy. She shields it with her hand from the draft flowing beneath the doorway. More twigs, then slightly larger sticks. Within a few minutes, the fire is alive once again. Its warmth slowly begins to spread through the hall. Orange light dances across carved wooden pillars that support the heavy roof above. The shadows retreat into the corners. One by one, others begin to wake, not because someone calls them, not because an alarm rings, simply because the changing light, the growing warmth, and the quiet sounds of morning tell them the day has begun. You open your eyes. Above you, dark timber beams disappear into the smoky ceiling. The scent of burning birchwood fills the air. It is a smell that clings to every Viking home. Your bed is simple, a wooden sleeping platform covered with straw, animal skins, and woven wool blankets. Comfort by modern standards is modest, yet after yesterday's work in the fields, it was more than enough. You sit up slowly. The cold immediately reminds you that summer is short in this northern land. Even during the warmer months, mornings often begin with a chill. There is no rush. Life here follows the sun. Working before dawn would serve little purpose. Without artificial light, darkness belonged to rest. As your eyes adjust, you begin to notice the people around you. A young boy rubs his eyes while trying not to yawn. His younger sister remains wrapped tightly beneath her blanket, pretending she hasn't heard her mother calling softly. Near the doorway, the family's dog stretches dramatically before giving a satisfied shake. The sheep behind their wooden partition begin to stir. One lets out a quiet bleat. Soon another answers. The animals understand morning almost as well as the people do. Outside, the sky grows lighter. The first birds begin their morning songs. Perhaps a raven circles above the nearby trees. Perhaps seabirds glide over the still waters of the fjord, searching for the day's first fish. The world is waking together. Before anyone thinks about breakfast, before anyone reaches for tools, before the fields call for another day's labor, there is one simple task that cannot wait: water. Unlike today, where clean water flows from a tap with little thought, every bucket here must be carried by hand. Someone must make the short walk to the nearby stream. If winter has come, perhaps ice must first be broken. If heavy rain has fallen, the path may already be muddy. Either way, the household depends upon that fresh water. You lift a smooth wooden bucket. Its handle feels familiar in your hands. The door opens. A breath of icy morning air fills the longhouse. Outside, the valley is beautiful. Mist drifts lazily across the grass. Tiny drops of dew sparkle on every blade. The fjord lies perfectly still, reflecting the pale colors of dawn like polished glass. For a brief moment, before the day's work begins, Everything feels peaceful. The fields are quiet. The animals wait patiently. The mountains watch silently, just as they have for thousands of years. It is easy, standing here, to understand why the Norse filled their stories with giants, spirits, and gods. In a landscape this vast, nature itself feels alive. You begin walking toward the stream. The damp earth softens beneath your leather boots. Nearby, wildflowers sway gently in the morning breeze. Some will later be gathered for simple medicines. Others simply brighten the edge of the path. The water is cold, so cold that your fingers ache for a moment as you lower the bucket beneath the clear surface. You pause. Looking down, you see your reflection ripple gently across the water. Not a warrior, not a king, not the hero of an old saga, just another farmer. One of millions of ordinary people whose quiet lives built the Viking world from the ground up. And in many ways, their stories are the ones most worth remembering. The bucket feels heavier on the return walk, not because the water weighs any more than before, but because the day has truly begun. Ahead, thin streams of smoke drift lazily upward from the roof of the longhouse, disappearing into the brightening morning sky. The valley has changed in only a few minutes. The stars have vanished. The eastern mountains now glow with the first soft hints of gold. Birdsong has replaced the silence of night, and somewhere nearby, a rooster proudly announces the sunrise. Even though everyone has already awakened, you step through the low wooden doorway. Warm air immediately wraps around you. It carries the familiar scent of smoke, freshly split birch wood, and something else, something comforting: porridge. The grandmother has already placed a heavy iron cooking pot above the fire. Inside, barley slowly simmers with water, becoming thick and creamy as gentle bubbles rise to the surface. The smell is earthy, sibyl, familiar. It is not the rich aroma of buttered toast or fresh coffee. Neither of those belongs to this world. Instead, this is the scent that has greeted countless Scandinavian mornings for generations. There is a quiet rhythm to breakfast. No one rushes, no one eats while walking. There is still time before the fields demand everyone's attention. The youngest children sit nearest the warmth of the fire. One little boy struggles to stay awake, rubbing his eyes as he leans against his older sister. Across the room, a man carefully sharpens a small utility knife with a smooth whetstone, not because he expects danger today, simply because a sharp blade makes every task easier. In Viking society, a good knife was perhaps the single most useful tool a person owned. It cut rope, prepared food, carved wood, repaired leather, harvested crops. Even children often carried small knives, learning from an early age how to use them responsibly. The grandmother stirs the pot slowly, wooden spoon, clockwise, again, and again. Patience is the secret to good porridge. Grain was too valuable to waste through careless cooking. Barley was the most common choice throughout much of Scandinavia. It grew more reliably than wheat in the cool northern climate. Oats were also common. So was rye. Each farm depended upon what its land could produce. Modern breakfasts often offered dozens of choices: tosto, eggs, fruit, yogurt, cereal, coffee, perhaps even pancakes on a weekend. Here, there is usually only one meal waiting, and nobody complains. When every harvest depends upon months of difficult labor, gratitude becomes part of everyday life. Wooden bowls are passed around the room. Each one is slightly different. Some are so smooth and carefully carved. Others show the marks of years of use. Perhaps a father carved them during the long winter evenings when darkness arrived before supper. Nothing here comes from a factory. Everything carries the marks of human hands. The grandmother carefully ladles steaming porridge into each bowl. The youngest receive theirs first, then the elderly, then everyone else. It is a quiet reminder that strength is measured not only by muscles, but also by care for one another. You accept your bowl with both hands. It is pleasantly warm against your fingers. A small piece of coarse barley bread accompanies the meal dressed to dark, filling, very different from the soft loaves many people enjoy today. The bread has been baked using grain carefully stored from last year's harvest. Every loaf represents months of work, preparing fields, sowing seed, protecting crops, harvesting, threshing, grinding flour between heavy stones. Nothing about this meal has been easy. A wooden cup follows. Inside, cool buttermilk, slightly sour requaffing. Fresh milk rarely stayed fresh for long. Instead, much of it became butter, cheese, or fermented drinks that lasted much longer. Viking farmers were practical. Food needed to survive changing seasons, not simply taste good for a single afternoon. Some mornings, there might also be dried fish, especially in coastal communities. Cod, herring, or salmon hung for weeks in cool sea air until it became firm enough to store through winter. Its flavor is stronger than fresh fish, saltier, chewier, rich with the taste of the ocean. If fortune had smiled upon the household recently, perhaps someone adds a spoonful of honey to the porridge. Honey is precious, not only because it sweetens food, but because beeswax is equally valuable. It makes candles, seals containers, protects leather. Every beehive is a small treasure. Sugar, as we know it today, does not exist here. The sweetness of honey is enough to delight both children and adults. As everyone eats, conversation remains gentle. People discuss the weather, clouds gathering above the mountains, whether the western field should be planted tomorrow instead of today, whether one of the sheep seems ready to give birth. No one speaks loudly, no one dominates the room. Morning belongs to quiet preparation. Outside, sunlight finally reaches the upper slopes of the valley. The longhouse door remains slightly open. Fresh air flows gently inside, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and pine trees warmed by the first rays of the sun. You notice something else. No forks, no porcelain plates, no polished silver. Meals are simple. Wooden bowls, wooden spoons, sometimes drinking horns, occasionally pottery. Archaeologists have discovered countless examples of these everyday objects, quietly preserved beneath the soil for centuries. They remind us that history is not only built by kings and warriors. Sometimes, history survives through an ordinary spoon. One final bite remains. You scrape the bowl clean. Leaving food behind would seem wasteful, especially after a long winter. The empty bowls are collected immediately. Children help carry them toward a wooden tub where they will later be rinsed using fresh water from the stream. Everyone contributes. Even the youngest members of the household learn early that work is simply part of life. There is satisfaction in this rhythm. No one asks, "What should I do today?" Everyone already knows. The seasons have answered that question long before sunrise. Outside, the oxen wait patiently near the edge of the field. The wooden plow rests where it was left yesterday evening. The soil has begun to warm beneath the growing sunlight. Today, there is much work to do, but there is no feeling of panic, only quiet purpose. You stand, stretch your shoulders, take one last look around the longhouse, and step outside into the cool Nordic morning. The real work is finally about to begin. Transition as the wooden door closes softly behind you. The smell of fresh earth replaces the smell of smoke. The valley is fully awake now. The fields are waiting, and beyond them, another ordinary day in the Viking Age quietly unfolds. The wooden door closes quietly behind you. For a brief moment, you simply stand still. The morning has fully arrived. The air is crisp, clean, and carries the faint scent of salt drifting inland from the fjord. Tiny droplets of dew cling to every blade of grass, catching the first rays of sunlight like countless little stars scattered across the ground. The valley is awake now, not suddenly, but gradually. A raven glides silently overhead. Somewhere beyond the nearby trees, a woodpecker taps patiently against an old pine trunk. Farther down the slope, A pair of sheep begin grazing without the slightest concern for the busy day ahead. Nature follows its own quiet schedule, and today, you'll follow it too. You begin walking toward the fields. The path beneath your boots is uneven. Small stones press against the leather soles with nearly every step. That is one thing visitors from warmer lands often noticed about Scandinavia. It is beautiful, but it is not generous. The land asks for effort. Every field you pass has earned its place through years, sometimes generations, of patient labor. Long before these crops were planted, families cleared forests by hand. They cut trees with iron axes, burned tangled roots, dragged away enormous stones left behind by ancient glaciers. Even now, those stones continue to appear. Every spring, the frost pushes new rocks toward the surface, and every spring, someone carries them away again. Farming here is never truly finished. It simply begins again. As you reach the edge of the field, the soil looks different from the rich black earth found in many parts of Europe. It is thinner, lighter, mixed with gravel and small stones. At first glance, it doesn't seem like a place where much could grow. Yet generations of farmers learned its secrets. They understood which patches held moisture after rain, which slopes received the earliest sunlight, which corners remained frozen longest after winter. Knowledge passed quietly from parent to child often mattered more than strength alone. Waiting near the field are two oxen, broad-shouldered, powerful. Thin wisps of steam rise from their noses in the cool morning air. Unlike horses, oxen are slower, but they are dependable. They can pull heavy loads for hours without complaint. In many Viking communities, an ox was among the family's most valuable possessions. Losing one could mean losing an entire growing season. You step toward one of the animals. Its rough coat feels surprisingly warm beneath your hand. It barely acknowledges your presence. This morning is as ordinary to the ox as yesterday was, and tomorrow will be much the same. Nearby rests the family's plow. If you're imagining a large steel machine, you'll need to leave that image behind. This is something much simpler, much older. Known today as an ard, it is little more than a sturdy wooden frame fitted with a small iron tip. Unlike modern plows, it does not turn the soil over completely. Instead, it scratches narrow lines into the earth, just enough for seeds to settle beneath the surface. By modern standards, it might seem inefficient, yet for centuries, it served farmers remarkably well. You lift the wooden handle. Its surface is smooth where countless hands have held it before. The polished wood tells its own story. Every scratch, every worn edge, every repaired joint speaks of years of careful use. Nothing here is disposable. If something breaks, it is repaired, again and again, until it can serve no longer. The leather harness is fastened around the oxen. They begin moving almost immediately, slowly, patently. The wooden plow groans as it bites into the earth. A shallow line appears behind it. Dark soil rises gently to either side. The sound is almost hypnotic. Wood creaking, leather stretching, heavy footsteps pressing into damp ground. For a while, nothing else exists. One straight row, then another, then another. Modern life often celebrates speed. Finish quickly. Move faster, do more. But here, speed has very little value. Carefulness matters far more. A crooked row wastes precious seed. A broken plow wastes precious time. A tired ox wastes precious strength. Everything depends upon steady, patient, deliberate work. As the morning sun climbs higher, you notice the smell of freshly turned earth. Rich, cool, slightly sweet. It mingles with the scent of damp grass and distant pine forests. For a brief moment, you stop to wipe your brow, although the air remains cool. Your body has already begun to warm from the effort. Across the valley, other families are working too. Tiny figures move through neighboring fields. From this distance, they seem almost timeless. 1,000 years later, A farmer pausing to rest beneath the morning sun would look remarkably familiar. The tools may change, the clothing may change, but the quiet satisfaction of honest work, perhaps that never changes at all. Soon, someone appears carrying a woven basket. Inside are handfuls of precious seed, mostly barley, some oats, perhaps a little rye. Barley is the heart of this farm. It grows reliably in Scandinavia's cool climate. It becomes bread, porridge, ale, even animal feed when necessary. Without barley, survival becomes much more difficult. Each handful of seed represents hope and risk. Every grain placed into the ground is one that cannot be eaten today. Instead, the family places its trust in tomorrow. You kneel beside one freshly cut furrow. The soil feels cool against your fingertips. One by one, you scatter the seeds, not carelessly, not hurriedly. Years of experience have taught every farmer how much space each plant will eventually need. Too close, and they compete for sunlight. Too far apart, and valuable land is wasted. Even something as simple as planting grain carries quiet wisdom gathered over generations. The breeze grows a little stronger. It carries the salty smell of the sea. You glance toward the fjord. Sunlight now dances across its surface in thousands of shimmering reflections. Somewhere out there, merchant ships may already be traveling toward distant markets. Some may carry walrus ivory, furs, amber iron, or timber. Yet here, none of that feels especially important. The world beyond the fjord can wait. Right now, your entire world is contained within these few acres of earth. Because every future journey, every feast, every celebration, every winter survived begins with this simple field. The row is finished. You straighten your back slowly. The oxen stop as if they understand the moment. A cool breeze brushes across your face. The morning is still young. There is much work ahead. But there is also something deeply satisfying about looking behind you and seeing neat lines stretching across the earth, quiet evidence that another day has been well begun. By now, the morning sun has climbed above the eastern mountains. Its golden light spreads slowly across the valley, warming the frost that still lingers in the shadows. The work in the fields will continue later. There is always another furrow to plow, another row to sow, another stone waiting to be carried away. But first, there are mouths to feed, not just the people inside the longhouse. The animals, too, are waiting. On a Viking farm, the day always revolved around them. You begin walking toward a series of simple wooden enclosures built beside the longhouse. They are not large, just sturdy fences made from split logs and woven branches. Nothing is decorated, nothing is unnecessary. Every piece of wood has been cut, shaped, and carried here by hand. As you approach, the sheep notice you first. Several lift their heads from the grass. One lets out a soft bleat. Another wanders closer, curious but cautious. Their thick wool hangs unevenly across their bodies. These are not the fluffy sheep many people imagine today. Centuries of selective breeding have not yet transformed them. Their wool is rougher, their bodies are smaller, but they are perfectly suited to the cold Scandinavian climate. Every spring, their wool is carefully sheared, not simply for clothing. Wool becomes almost everything: warm blankets, tunics, cloaks, socks, gloves. Even the sails that carried Viking ships across the sea often relied on tightly woven wool. It is difficult to overstate how valuable a single sheep could be. Long before factories, every thread began with an animal. A young girl, perhaps no older than 10, opens the gate. She already knows her morning task. Without being asked, she begins scattering handfuls of dried hay gathered during the previous summer. The sheep crowd together eagerly, watching her. It becomes clear that childhood here is very different from childhood in the modern world. Children do not wait until adulthood to become useful. They learn by helping. Every chore is also a lesson. Every season teaches another skill. Nearby, A pair of goats climb effortlessly onto a pile of stones, searching for tender leaves growing between the cracks. Goats are remarkable animals. Where sheep prefer open pasture, goats happily explore steep hillsides and rocky slopes. They eat plants that many other animals ignore, brush small branches, wild herbs. In difficult years, their ability to survive almost anywhere could mean the difference between hunger and comfort. One of the older women carries a smooth wooden bucket beneath a quiet brown goat. She sits on a small stool carved from a single piece of timber. The goat barely moves. It has repeated this routine hundreds of times before. The rhythmic sound of milk striking the wooden pail fills the morning air. Soft, steady, almost musical. Fresh milk will not last very long, especially once summer arrives. So much of it will soon become butter. Soft cheese, or a thick fermented drink similar to yogurt. These foods store far better than fresh milk. A Viking family is always thinking ahead, not just about today, but about winter. Winter is never very far from anyone's thoughts. Even in midsummer, preparations quietly continue, because everyone remembers the last harsh winter, and everyone knows another one will come. Not far from the goats, you hear a different sound, a low, gentle grunt. The pigs have awakened. Unlike the sheep, they show little interest in greeting visitors. Instead, they continue searching the ground with determined snouts. Pigs were excellent at turning scraps into food. Kitchen leftovers, acorns from nearby forests, roots hidden beneath the soil. Very little went to waste. A healthy pig represented something every family valued, a dependable source of meat when colder months arrived. The smell here is stronger, earthier, less pleasant than the grassy scents surrounding the sheep. Yet no one complains. This is simply another part of farm life. Every useful animal leaves its own mark upon the landscape. A few steps farther, a horse raises its head. Compared with the enormous horses of today, it seems surprisingly compact, stocky, powerful, built for endurance rather than speed. The ancestors of the modern Icelandic horse already existed during the Viking Age, strong enough to carry people across rough mountain trails, yet gentle enough to work alongside the family every day. You run your hand along its neck. Its thick mane catches the sunlight. For a moment, horse and human stand quietly together. No words are needed. Trust has been built through countless shared journeys. Not every family owned many horses. Some had only one. Some shared with neighbors. Others relied mostly upon oxen. Like nearly everything in this valley, wealth varied from household to household. Then, something brushes softly against your leg. You look down. A cat, small, gray. Its bright eyes watched you with complete confidence. Cats occupied a special place on Viking farms, not because they were pets in the modern sense, but because they hunted mice, and mice loved grain. Every sack of barley stored for winter attracted hungry little thieves. Without cats, those stores might shrink surprisingly quickly. The cat circles your boots once, then disappears toward the barn, already searching for breakfast of its own. Perhaps no animal receives less attention, yet performs such valuable work. Above, a flock of geese suddenly takes flight from the edge of the marsh. Their wings beat loudly against the morning air. The sound echoes across the valley before gradually fading into the distance. You pause for a moment, simply listening. It is remarkable how many different sounds make up a single Viking morning. The quiet chewing of sheep, the steady rhythm of milking, birdsong drifting from the forest, the distant splash of water against the fjord, the creaking of leather harnesses, the soft footsteps of people moving through damp grass. There are no engines, no machines, no electric hum filling the background, only nature and people working alongside it. Perhaps this is why the old Norse stories speak so often of the natural world, the wind, the sea, the forests, the animals. None of these were distant scenery. They were companions, neighbors, sometimes helpers, sometimes challenges, always respected. As the last of the animals finish eating, the fences are checked one more time. A loose board is quickly repaired with a wooden peg. A gate is secured. A water trough is refilled. Small jobs, hardly worth mentioning on their own. Yet farms survive because thousands of small jobs are completed before they become large problems. The sun now stands noticeably higher above the valley. The cool morning air is beginning to soften. Soon, the household will return to the fields, but before that, there is one craft practiced almost every single day, especially by the women of the household. It is quiet work, podden work, work that transformed rough wool into warm clothing, and eventually into the great sails that carried Viking ships across the northern seas. And so, our next stop is inside the longhouse once again. As the morning grows warmer, some members of the household remain outside, continuing their work in the fields. But not every important task happens beneath the open sky. You step once more into the longhouse. Your eyes take a moment to adjust. Outside, the summer sun shines brightly. Inside, the room is filled with gentle shadows. Soft beams of sunlight fall through the smoke hole in the roof, catching tiny particles of ash as they drift lazily through the air. The fire still burns quietly at the center of the hall. Its warmth is welcome. Even during summer, the thick timber walls keep the interior pleasantly cool. Near one wall, an older woman sits on a low wooden bench. Beside her rests a woven basket overflowing with freshly washed wool. It has been cleaned carefully, removing as much dirt and loose grass as possible. Now, another transformation begins. She reaches into the basket, pulling out a handful of soft white fibers. For a moment, she simply runs them gently between her fingers. The wool feels surprisingly light, almost like a cloud. Yet within these loose fibers lies the beginning of nearly everything the family wears. Cloaks, tunics, blankets, mittens, hoods, even the great sails that carry ships across the North Atlantic begin with wool. There are no factories here, no machines. Every thread must first be made by hand. She picks up a simple wooden tool. At first glance, it hardly seems remarkable. A slender stick with a small round weight fixed near one end. Historians call it a drop spindle. It is one of humanity's oldest inventions, simple enough for a child to understand, yet clever enough to serve civilizations for thousands of years. She twists the spindle gently. It begins to spin, round and round and round slowly. Almost magically, the loose wool transforms into a strong strand of yarn. Her fingers move with quiet confidence. Brule, twist, spin, brule, twist, spin. There is no hurry. There never has been. This work rewards patience far more than speed. The gentle spinning continues. Its rhythm is strangely comforting. Perhaps, after only a few minutes, you find yourself breathing in time with it. Around and around and around. Many archaeologists believe that nearly every Viking household owned several spindles. Excavations across Scandinavia have uncovered hundreds of beautifully carved spindle whorls made from stone, clay, glass, and even decorated bone. Some are wonderfully simple, others display intricate patterns. Even an everyday tool could become something beautiful. Nearby, another woman works at a large upright loom. It towers almost to the ceiling. Wooden weights hang from dozens of long threads, keeping them stretched perfectly straight, unlike the modern looms found in factories. This one moves only as quickly as human hands allow. She passes the thread carefully through the waiting fibers, forward, then back again, forward, then back. The wooden frame answers with a soft, gentle creak. The sound repeats quietly through the hall. It is almost musical, a slow rhythm, steady enough to calm even the busiest mind. You watch the cloth slowly appear, not all at once, not in great sheets, but one tiny line after another, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. The fabric grows almost unnoticed. It is a quiet reminder that many worthwhile things in life happen gradually. A finished cloak might require weeks of work, sometimes months, especially if the wool first needed to be cleaned, carded, spun, dyed, and woven. Every garment represented an extraordinary investment of time. That is why clothing was treasured. It was repaired, passed down, resewn for children, worn until little remained. Nothing was thrown away simply because it looked old. Near the fire, a younger girl watches carefully. She cannot yet weave with the confidence of her mother, but she is learning. Her small fingers imitate each movement. Sometimes she makes mistakes. The thread slips, the rows become uneven. Nobody scolds her. Every skilled weaver once made the very same mistakes. Knowledge here is not taught through books. It is taught through patient observation, through repetition, through quiet encouragement outside. The wind brushes gently across the turf roof. Inside, the loom continues its steady song. Creak, tap, slide. Creak, tap, slide. If you close your eyes, it almost sounds like breathing. The longhouse itself feels alive. The fire crackles softly. Someone stirs a cooking pot. A child laughs somewhere near the doorway before quickly falling silent again. The scent of wool mixes with the familiar smell of smoke, wood, and drying herbs hanging from the rafters overhead. Bundles of yarrow, angelica, and wild thyme sway gently whenever the breeze finds its way inside. Some will flavor food, others will be used as simple medicines when winter illnesses arrive. Every corner of the longhouse serves a purpose. Nothing is empty, nothing is wasted. Even the sunlight is put to work, falling exactly where careful hands need it most. You begin to understand something. History often remembers Viking ships, their swords, their raids, their kings, yet none of those things could have existed without this quiet room. Without wool, there are no warm clothes. Without woven sails, there are no long voyages. Without careful hands, there is no Viking age as we know it. Sometimes, the most important work leaves behind the fewest stories. As another length of cloth slowly grows upon the loom, the woman pauses for a moment. She smiles quietly, not because the work is finished, far from it, but because another small piece has been completed. And in this world, small pieces, patiently added together, are how entire lives are built. The steady rhythm of the loom gradually comes to a pause. Outside, the sun has climbed high above the valley. Its light now reaches every corner of the farm. The morning chill has disappeared, replaced by the gentle warmth of a Scandinavian summer afternoon. For a little while, the work can wait, not because the fields are finished, they never truly are, but because even the hardest working hands need rest. Across the farm, people begin making their way back toward the longhouse. One by one, they arrive without being called. There is no bell announcing the meal, no clock striking noon. Instead, the position of the sun, the growing hunger in everyone's stomach, and years of shared routine tell them that it is time. The oxen are led into the shade. Their leather harnesses are carefully removed. A young boy pats one gently along its broad shoulder before carrying a wooden bucket toward the nearby stream. The sheep settle quietly beneath a fence where patches of cool grass remain untouched by the sun. Even the farm dog, after following everyone since dawn, finds a comfortable place beneath a wooden cart. The entire farm seems to exhale. Inside the longhouse, the air is pleasantly warm. The fire has never been allowed to go out. Instead, it has burned quietly throughout the morning, always ready for the next pot, the next loaf, the next meal. Suspended above the glowing embers hangs a heavy iron cauldron. Steam rises gently from its surface. The smell drifting through the room is rich, earthy, and deeply comforting. Today, the meal is a simple stew. Nothing elaborate, nothing extravagant, but nourishing. That is what matters most. Inside the pot, barley simmers alongside onions, cabbage, and broad beans gathered from the garden. A few wild herbs, picked earlier in the morning, add a gentle fragrance. Perhaps there are small pieces of smoked lamb or dried fish. The exact ingredients change with the seasons and with the family's fortunes. There is no written recipe. Every household prepares the stew a little differently, each generation adding its own quiet traditions. One thing becomes clear very quickly. Meals here are never hurried. The food has taken months to produce. The grain, the vegetables, the animals, every ingredient represents countless hours of patient work. To rush through eating would almost seem disrespectful. Wooden bowls are passed from hand to hand. The eldest receive theirs first, then the youngest. Finally, everyone else. It is a custom found in many farming communities throughout history. Respect is shown not through grand speeches, but through simple everyday gestures. You accept your bowl. The steam rises slowly into the cool air above the fire. Its warmth reaches your face before the first spoonful does. The broth is thick, the barley soft, but still pleasantly firm. It is the kind of meal that settles comfortably in the stomach, giving strength for many more hours of work. As everyone eats, conversation begins quietly. No one raises their voice. The topics are ordinary. Has the southern pasture recovered after last winter? Will enough hay be gathered before autumn rains arrive? Has anyone seen signs of foxes near the chicken enclosure? Someone mentions that a neighbor plans to repair his roof before the first storms of autumn. Another wonders whether wild berries will ripen early this year. These conversations may seem small, yet they shape daily life far more than distant kings or famous battles. History books often remember rulers. Ordinary people remember the weather. A young child laughs after spilling a little stew onto the table. His mother smiles, wipes it away with a wool cloth, and quietly continues eating. No one appears annoyed. Children learn through experience. Patience, like farming, takes time to grow. Near the doorway, an elderly man begins carving a small piece of birch wood. With his knife, his hands never seem to stop moving, even during meals. There is always something useful to make. Perhaps it will become the handle of a spoon, perhaps a peg for repairing a fence, perhaps a toy for one of the children. No scrap of good wood is wasted. Looking around the longhouse, you begin noticing details that escaped your attention earlier. Bundles of dried fish hang high above the hearth where smoke slowly preserves them. Leather boots dry near the fire after yesterday's rain. A row of carefully polished wooden bowls rests neatly upon a shelf. Several drinking horns hang from wooden pegs driven into the wall. Above them, a bundle of fishing nets waits patiently for the next journey onto the fjord. Every object tells a story, not of wealth, but of usefulness. Life here leaves very little room for decoration alone. Beauty often comes through craftsmanship. A smoothly carved bowl, a neatly woven cloak, a well-made knife. Objects are admired because they serve faithfully for many years. Outside, a gentle breeze carries the scent of pine through the open doorway. The fjord sparkles beneath the afternoon sun. Far in the distance, you notice something moving upon the water. At first, it is little more than a dark shape. Slowly, it becomes clearer. A boat, not a great warship, not one of the famous dragon-prowed vessels that often appear in paintings, just a modest trading boat, perhaps carrying timber, perhaps wool, perhaps barrels of dried fish. Trade was woven quietly into everyday Viking life. Even small farming communities were rarely isolated from the wider world. Goods, stories, and ideas traveled along these waters just as surely as people did. Someone glances toward the boat, nods once, and returns to the meal. There is no excitement. Boats come and go. Life continues. The stew is finished. The bowls are nearly empty. Outside, the afternoon still stretches ahead. There will be fences to repair, tools to sharpen, wood to gather. The rhythm of the day continues. Steady, predictable, and deeply satisfying. You rise slowly from the bench, carry your empty bowl toward the washing tub, and step once more into the warm summer sunlight. The farm, already waiting for the second half of the day. The afternoon sun rests comfortably above the valley, casting long ribbons of light across the fields. For a little while, the farm is quiet. The animals have settled. The midday meal has been shared. And now, another task quietly calls. You lift a well-worn axe from its place beside the longhouse wall. Its wooden handle has grown smooth through years of use. There is no decoration upon it, no silver, no carvings, only the gentle shine that comes from countless hands, gripping the same piece of wood, season after season, year after year. An axe like this is among the most valuable possessions on any Viking farm, not because it is a weapon, though it could certainly serve that purpose if needed, but because it builds, it shapes, it repairs. Without an axe, there is no warm fire in winter, no fence around the sheep, no roof above the family's heads, no boat resting beside the fjord. The forest provides nearly everything. You begin walking toward the trees. The path is familiar. Your boots press softly into the damp earth, where pine needles have gathered over many seasons. The air changes almost immediately. It becomes cooler here. The scent of salt from the fjord slowly fades, replaced by the rich fragrance of pine resin, fresh moss, and damp bark. Above, towering spruce and pine trees sway gently in the afternoon breeze. Their branches whisper to one another high overhead. Sunlight filters through the forest, falling in scattered patches across the ground. Some places glow with warm golden light, others remain cool and shaded. It feels almost like stepping into another world. A raven calls somewhere in the distance. Its deep voice echoes between the trunks before fading into silence. Many people today imagine ravens only because of Norse mythology, the birds of Odin watching the world from above. But to a Viking farmer, a raven is something much more ordinary, just another familiar neighbor of the forest, sometimes helpful, sometimes noisy, always present. The path narrows. Fern leaves brush gently against your boots. Wild blueberries grow beneath patches of sunlight. A few remain on the bushes. Most have already been gathered by children earlier in the week. Every journey into the forest offers little gifts: berries, mushrooms, medicinal herbs, firewood, straight branches for tool handles. Nothing is overlooked. Nothing is considered too small to matter. You pause beside an enormous pine tree. Its trunk is wider than you can comfortably wrap your arms around. It has likely stood here for centuries. Perhaps it was already growing when your grandparents were children, perhaps even before that. Trees like this were treated with respect, not because people feared them, but because great trees required generations to grow. Cutting one was never done carelessly. Instead, your attention turns toward a smaller tree nearby, straight, healthy, about the thickness of your arm, perfect for replacing part of a broken fence. You rest one hand against the bark. The rough surface feels cool beneath your fingertips. For a quiet moment, there is no sound except the wind. Then, the first swing. The axe bites cleanly into the wood, a sharp, solid thwack. Small chips scatter across the moss. You pause, not because you're tired, but because rushing only wastes strength. Another swing, then another. Each strike follows the same steady rhythm. Lift, swing, pause, lift, swing, pause. The sound carries softly through the trees. Far away, someone working another part of the forest might hear it and recognize it immediately. Not danger, simply another neighbor gathering wood for the coming seasons. Before long, the tree begins to lean. Very gently, almost reluctantly, there is a soft crack, then another. The branches sway one final time, and with a slow rustling sound, the tree settles onto the forest floor. No dramatic crash, only the quiet end of one life, beginning another soon. Its wood will warm a family through winter. Become part of a fence, perhaps even a cradle for a newborn child. Nothing ends here. Everything changes. You kneel beside the fallen trunk. The fresh scent of pine fills the air. It is wonderfully clean, almost sweet. Tiny drops of sticky resin shimmer in the afternoon light. You understand why Scandinavian forests have always been treasured. They are more than collections of trees. They are storehouses of life itself. Nearby, a red squirrel darts along a fallen log. It pauses only long enough to study you with bright, curious eyes. Before disappearing high into the branches, life continues all around you, quickly, podly, without concern for human plans. As you gather smaller branches into a neat bundle, your thoughts drift. Perhaps tomorrow will bring rain. Perhaps next week, neighbor will gather to help repair a damaged roof. Perhaps autumn will arrive a little earlier this year. Life here is always lived one season ahead. The future is measured not in months, but in harvests, not in years, but in winters survived. You tie the bundle together with a length of twisted rope, not too tightly, just enough that it rests comfortably across your shoulder. The walk home begins. As you leave the shelter of the trees, the sunlight greets you once again. The valley stretches peacefully before you. Smoke rises lazily from the longhouse. The sheep are still grazing. The fjord sparkles beneath the afternoon sky. For a brief moment, everything feels exactly as it should. And perhaps, for the people who lived here, that quiet feeling of enough was a kind of wealth all its own. As you leave the edge of the forest, the bundle of firewood resting comfortably across your shoulder, you hear something that has been absent for much of the day. Laughter. Not loud, not wild, just the gentle laughter of children enjoying a quiet afternoon. You follow the sound toward the open space beside the longhouse. There, beneath the shade of a broad birch tree, 3 children have gathered. The oldest cannot be more than 12. The youngest, perhaps 5. Their chores have been finished for now. There is still plenty of daylight remaining, and for a little while, the afternoon belongs to them. One child balances carefully on a fallen log, arms stretched wide, pretending it is the narrow edge of a great ship sailing across stormy seas. Another has arranged smooth stones into neat little circles, inventing rules that only the children themselves fully understand. The youngest watches closely, trying to imitate every movement. Children have always done this, in every century, in every corner of the world. Learning first by watching, then by trying, and finally, by teaching someone even younger. Many people imagine Viking childhood as harsh from beginning to end. Certainly, life demanded responsibility at an early age, but responsibility did not leave room for joy. Children laughed, they played, they explored streams, climbed trees, and imagined adventures just as children do today. Their toys were different, yet their curiosity was wonderfully familiar. Archaeologists have uncovered small wooden horses, tiny carved boats, simple dolls, and even miniature weapons carefully crafted for children. Some toys were made by parents during the long winter evenings. Others may have been carved by older brothers or loving grandparents. Each one represented precious time, and time was one of the greatest gifts anyone could give. Nearby, one little boy proudly carries a tiny wooden sword tucked beneath his belt. It looks impressive, at least to him, but its edges are rounded smooth. It is clearly made for play, not for fighting. He swings it through the air, defeating invisible enemies that only he can see. Within moments, he abandons the battle completely, distracted instead by a bright butterfly drifting across the meadow. Perhaps children have never changed quite as much as we imagine. A girl kneels beside a shallow stream. She carefully places a small stick into the flowing water, then another soothes. She has built a tiny bridge, no larger than her hand. She watches proudly as the current flows beneath it. No audience applauds. None is needed. The satisfaction comes simply from making something. Much of childhood here is filled with quiet imitation. A little girl wraps scraps of wool around a smooth branch, pretending to spin yarn like her mother. Another child uses a dull practice knife to shave thin curls from a piece of soft wood, copying the careful movements of his grandfather. No formal lessons begin with ringing bells. There are no classrooms, no rows of desks. Instead, the entire farm becomes the classroom. The fields teach patience, the forest teaches caution, the animals teach responsibility, and the seasons teach everyone. As you watch the children, you notice how naturally older ones care for the younger. When the smallest child stumbles over a tree root, an older sister quietly reaches down to help. No fuss, no dramatic concern, simply a hand offered without hesitation. Families depended upon one another. Children learned early that everyone had a place within the household, not because they were forced, but because they saw adults living that way every day. As the afternoon breeze rustles the leaves overhead, one of the boys looks toward the fjord. A small trading boat still glides quietly across the distant water. Perhaps he dreams of sailing someday, perhaps not. It is easy for us, living 1,000 years later, to assume every Viking child longed to become a famous explorer. Yet for most, life would remain close to home. Most would grow up, inherit a small piece of land, raise families of their own, and spend their lives beneath these same familiar mountains. And there was honor in that. History often celebrates those who traveled far, but communities survive because many people choose to stay. The children now gather around an elderly woman sitting outside the longhouse. She begins telling a simple story while slowly mending a wool cloak. No one interrupts. The youngest lean forward. The older children pretend not to listen, while secretly hanging upon every word. Stories are everywhere in Viking life. Not always the great tales of gods and heroes. Sometimes they are simply family stories. How a grandfather rescued a sheep from deep snow. How a fox stole a chicken one autumn. How the harvest was so abundant one summer that grain filled every storage bin. These small stories become family history, passed from one generation to the next. As the tale comes to an end, the children scatter once more. One races toward the sheep. Another follows a dragonfly dancing through the tall grass. The smallest sits quietly, collecting interesting pebbles beside the path. You cannot help but smile, looking at them. It becomes wonderfully clear that childhood has always contained the same quiet magic. The details change, the clothing changes, the language changes, but the curiosity, the imagination, the simple delight of discovering the world remain timeless. The afternoon sun begins its slow journey westward. The shadows grow just a little longer. Soon, the children will help with the evening chores. But for these few peaceful moments, they are free simply to be children, and somehow, that feels like one of the most beautiful parts of the entire day. The afternoon slowly begins to soften. The bright light of midday gives way to the gentle warmth of late afternoon. The shadows stretch a little farther across the valley. The breeze carries the scent of pine, mixed with fresh-cut grass, and the faint smell of smoke rising from the longhouse. You notice something beside the doorway, a simple wooden post. Nothing about it seems especially remarkable. It is weathered. Its surface has been darkened by countless seasons of rain, snow, and sunlight. Yet someone has carefully carved a few small symbols into the wood, not large enough to impress strangers, not decorative enough to be considered art, just quiet marks made by patient hands. For a moment, you pause beside them. It is easy, living more than 1,000 years later, to imagine that Viking religion was filled only with grand temples, dramatic sacrifices, and stories of mighty gods preparing for the end of the world. Those things certainly existed, but for most people, faith was much quieter. It lived Here, on farms like this, in ordinary homes, among ordinary families, for the farmer, the changing weather mattered more than distant politics. A week of rain could destroy newly planted crops. A harsh winter could claim valuable livestock. A late frost might undo months of careful work. Life depended upon forces no purse could fully control. And so, people looked toward the gods, not always asking for miracles, sometimes simply asking for a little good fortune, perhaps before planting. Someone quietly spoke a few familiar words, perhaps before sailing across the fjord. A traveler paused for a brief moment of gratitude, perhaps before winter arrived. A family shared a simple meal in honor of those who came before them. Many of these moments left no written record. They lived only in memory, passed gently from parent to child. Among the gods, one was especially familiar to farming families, Freyr, associated with peace, good harvests, and the gentle return of spring. Unlike the thunderous image many people have of Thor, Freyr represented something quieter, the hope that fields would grow, that animals would remain healthy, that another winter could be survived. For a farmer, these blessings mattered more than glory. Nearby, an older woman hangs small bundles of dried herbs above the doorway. Perhaps she simply wishes to keep them dry. Perhaps she believes they offer a little protection to the household. Perhaps both. In the Viking Age, daily life rarely separated practical knowledge from quiet belief. The two often lived comfortably together. Children watched these small traditions from the time they were very young. No one gathered them for long lessons. Instead, belief became part of ordinary life, just another thread woven quietly into the rhythm of every season. As you step inside the longhouse, the fire burns lower than before. Its flames dance gently beneath the cooking pot. The room feels peaceful. A grandfather sits quietly repairing a leather strap. Nearby, someone hums a simple melody while preparing vegetables for the evening meal. Outside, a raven lands briefly upon the roof. It tilts its head, almost as though observing the busy household below. For many Norse people, ravens held special meaning, not because every raven carried a message from the gods, but because these intelligent birds had shared the Scandinavian landscape with people for countless generations. Sometimes, the natural world itself felt sacred, not because it was separate from everyday life, but because it was woven into it. The towering forests, the rushing rivers, the sea, the mountains, each reminded people that they lived within something far greater than themselves. Modern life often encourages us to separate work, nature, and spirituality. For many Viking families, those boundaries barely existed. Planting grain, caring for sheep, repairing a roof, giving thanks for rain, all belong to the same quiet rhythm. As the afternoon light grows softer, you notice a small wooden bowl resting upon a shelf. Inside lies a single piece of fresh bread. No one reaches for it. Perhaps it has been set aside for someone returning late from the fields, or perhaps it forms part of a simple household offering. Historians cannot always know. The archaeological evidence tells us many things, but not every quiet custom leaves a clear trace behind. Sometimes, history asks us to accept uncertainty, and perhaps that uncertainty carries its own quiet beauty. Outside, the wind stirs the tall grass. The sheep lift their heads for only a moment before returning to their peaceful grazing. Life continues, just as it always has, whether the gods are watching or not. The fields still need tending. The animals still need caring for. Children still laugh. Bread still rises beside the fire. And tomorrow, the sun will rise once again above the fjord. Perhaps that simple promise was miracle enough. You step back outside. The valley now glows beneath the warm light of late afternoon. Everything seems softer, calmer, more peaceful than before. The carved symbols beside the doorway remain exactly where they have always been. Quiet witnesses, to countless ordinary lives, lives rarely remembered by name, yet no less important than those of kings or heroes. The afternoon slowly gives way to evening, not suddenly but so gradually that you almost fail to notice. The sunlight has changed. Gone is the bright white light of midday. Now, everything is painted in soft shades of gold. The mountains surrounding the valley seem taller somehow, their slopes glowing beneath the lowering sun. Long shadows stretch across the fields. The air cools ever so slightly. It carries with it the familiar scent of freshly cut grass, warm earth, and the gentle salt of the nearby fjord. This is the hour when a Viking farm begins to slow, not because the work is finished. There is always another task waiting, but because every person understands that daylight is precious. Soon, there will be no more of it. You walk toward the pasture once again. The sheep have wandered farther than before. Their quiet bells create a gentle rhythm as they move through the tall grass. Clink, pause, clink, pause. The sound drifts peacefully across the valley. One by one, the animals begin making their way back toward their enclosures. No one shouts, no dogs bark wildly. The routine is so familiar that both people and animals know exactly what comes next. A young boy opens the wooden gate. His father stands nearby, holding a long shepherd's staff. The sheep pass quietly between them. Each animal receives a quick glance, not counted with numbers alone, but recognized individually. The older ewe with the torn ear, the curious lamb that always wanders first, the ram whose thick wool seems to collect every burr in the meadow. A healthy farmer knows his animals just as surely as he knows the faces of his neighbors. Nearby, the goats return more reluctantly. One pauses to nibble at the leaves of a low birch branch. Another investigates a patch of wildflowers before finally following the others home. You cannot help but smile. Even 1,000 years ago, some goats were just as stubborn as they are today. Inside another enclosure, the oxen stand quietly chewing their evening feed. Their day's work is complete. The heavy wooden plow rests nearby, leaning comfortably against a fence. Its iron tip still carries traces of dark soil. Tomorrow morning, it will return to the fields once again. A wooden bucket is lowered into the well. The rope creaks softly against the worn timber. Cool water rises slowly toward the surface. Each animal drinks in turn. Fresh water is never taken for granted, especially during dry summers. The bucket is filled again, and again work. Sibyl work, necessary work. As you move around the farm, small repairs continue wherever they are needed. A loose fence rail is secured with a freshly carved peg. A worn leather strap is tightened. A cracked wooden handle is carefully wrapped before it has the chance to split completely. Modern life often waits until something breaks completely. Here, maintenance is simply part of daily life. A few careful moments today prevent many difficult hours tomorrow. Near the edge of the field, several chickens scratch busily through the grass. They search for seeds, small insects, and anything else the earth chooses to offer. One hen proudly leads a line of fluffy chicks through the fading sunlight. They hurry to keep up with her, their tiny feet moving almost faster than their little bodies can manage. Watching them, you feel an unexpected sense of peace, perhaps because scenes like this have changed so very little over the centuries. The names of kings may fade, empires may rise and fall, yet a mother hen leading her chicks across a farmyard remains wonderfully timeless. As the evening breeze strengthens, the smell of smoke grows richer. Someone has already added fresh logs to the central hearth. Soon, the evening meal will begin. From outside, you hear the rhythmic sound of grain being ground between heavy millstones. Slowly, steadily, the rough kernels become flour. It is hard work, but familiar work. The steady scraping of stone against stone almost becomes another piece of the farm's evening music. The children help where they can. One gathers kindling, Another carries empty buckets back toward the well. The youngest proudly brings handfuls of herbs picked from the garden. Even the task is celebrated, not with applause, but with quiet gratitude. Everyone belongs. Everyone contributes. That simple understanding gives the household a feeling of calm purpose. You pause for a moment beside the fence. Beyond it, the fjord lies perfectly still. The afternoon breeze has almost disappeared. The water reflects the evening sky like polished glass. A lone seabird glides silently across its surface, leaving barely a ripple behind. Far beyond the mountains, other families are finishing these same evening chores, lighting their fires, gathering their sheep, preparing their meals. The Viking world is vast, yet in this moment, it feels wonderfully close. One ordinary farm among thousands, one ordinary evening shared across the north. The first stars have not yet appeared, but you know, they soon will. The day's work has gently folded itself into memory. The tools are returned to their places. The gates are secured. The animals are safe. There is satisfaction in knowing that nothing important has been forgotten. You take one last slow walk around the farm. Everything feels peaceful, complete, ready to rest. The last of the evening light slowly slips behind the mountains. For a few quiet moments, the valley glows with soft shades of amber, rose, and deep blue. Then, almost without noticing, the world begins to grow darker. One by one, the family returns to the longhouse. The wooden door opens. A cool breath of evening air follows everyone inside. Before the warmth of the fire welcomes them home, the hearth has been burning all day. It is the heart of the house, never truly forgotten, never allowed to grow cold. Fresh pieces of pine rest upon the glowing embers. They release a pleasant scent, rich with warm resin. The flames dance softly, casting golden light across the timber walls. Shadows move slowly across the ceiling beams. Nothing is hurried here. Outside, night is approaching. Inside, time seems to slow. The long wooden table fills once again, not with luxury but with comfort. Freshly baked barley bread rests upon a wooden board. Its crust is dark, its center warm and dense. A simple knife slices each loaf into thick pieces. No one worries whether every slice is perfectly even. What matters is that everyone receives enough. The stew prepared earlier still simmers gently above the fire. Its flavors have deepened through the afternoon. Barley, cabbage, onions, perhaps a few pieces of smoked lamb or dried fish. Simple ingredients patiently transformed into something deeply satisfying. A small wooden bowl of fresh butter is placed upon the table. Nearby, a little soft cheese made from goat's milk. If the season has been kind, there may even be wild berries gathered from the forest, blueberries, lingonberries, or sweet cloudberries from distant marshes. Not every evening offers such treats. That is precisely what makes them special. The youngest child reaches eagerly toward the bread, then pauses waiting, not because someone has spoken, but because everyone knows the quiet rhythm of the meal. The elders begin first, then the children, then the rest of the household. Respect here is rarely announced. It is simply practiced. Wooden cups are quietly filled. Some contain cool spring water, others a weak ale brewed from barley. Safer to drink than standing water in many places, and common at nearly every meal. Despite modern imagination, this is no great feast. There are no overflowing tables, no roasted boars turning dramatically over great fires. Those celebrations certainly happened on special occasions, but ordinary evenings were ordinary, and perhaps that is exactly what makes them beautiful. The family begins eating. For a little while, the room grows wonderfully quiet. Only the gentle sounds of wooden spoons against bowls, the crackling fire, and the soft sigh of the wind outside. The day's work has earned this silence. No one feels the need to fill every moment with conversation. Sometimes, sharing peaceful company is enough. You notice the grandmother smiling gently as she watches the youngest child carefully dipping bread into the warm stew. A little broth drips onto the table. She quietly wipes it away with a cloth, without saying a word. These tiny moments, repeated thousands of evenings across countless generations, rarely appear in history books, yet they formed the true rhythm of ordinary life. Near the fire, a kettle hangs above the glowing coals. Inside, water gently warms with wild herbs, yarrow, mint, perhaps a little thyme. The fragrant steam slowly fills the room. The scent is comforting, fresh, earthy. You breathe deeply. The warmth of the longhouse, the smell of bread, the quiet company, everything invites the body to relax. Outside, the wind rustles gently through the grass. The sheep have settled for the night. The horses stand quietly beneath the stars that are beginning to appear. Somewhere far away, an owl calls from the edge of the forest. Its voice echoes softly through the valley. Inside, the youngest children begin to yawn. One leans comfortably against a parent's shoulder. Another curls beneath a folded wool blanket beside the hearth. There is no bedtime story just yet, only the peaceful certainty that everyone is home, safe, warm, together. Perhaps that simple feeling has always been one of humanity's greatest comforts. You glance around the room one more time. The carved bowls, the woven cloaks, the carefully repaired tools resting neatly against the wall. Every object tells the story of patient hands. Nothing expensive, nothing extravagant, only things made with care, things expected to last. The fire pops softly. A single spark rises toward the smoke hole before disappearing into the dark evening sky. The room grows quieter still. The meal has ended. The bowls are stacked. The table is wiped clean. Outside, night has fully arrived. But inside, another tradition is only just beginning. When darkness covered the valley, and no more work could be done, families turned to something that required no daylight at all. Stories, quaint stories, shared beside the fire. The fire has settled into glowing embers. Its bright flames have softened now, replaced by a steady orange glow that fills the longhouse with gentle warmth. Outside, night has quietly wrapped itself around the valley. The mountains have become dark silhouettes against a sky scattered with stars. The fjord reflects tiny points of light, as though the heavens themselves have drifted down to rest upon the water. Inside, everyone has found a comfortable place. The day's work is finished. No more fences need repairing. No more grain needs grinding. No more animals wait to be fed. For a little while, there is simply time. The youngest children draw closer to the fire, wrapped in thick wool blankets. They lean comfortably against their parents. Even the family dog curls into a tight circle near the warmth of the hearth. Its eyes grow heavy. The room grows wonderfully quiet. Then an older voice breaks the silence. Not loudly, not dramatically, simply the familiar voice of someone who has told these stories many times before. Long before books filled shelves, stories lived inside people. They traveled from memory to memory, from grandparents to grandchildren. Each telling became a bridge, connecting one generation to the next. No two stories were ever exactly alike. A grandfather might remember one detail, a grandmother another. A child hearing the tale tonight might one day tell it slightly differently to children of their own. In that way, stories remained alive. They breathed, they changed, yet somehow they always remained familiar. Tonight, the old storyteller smiles gently, then begins. Long ago, he says softly, before my grandfather was born, and before his grandfather was born, the children lean a little closer. There lived, high among the northern hills, an old shepherd. He was neither rich nor famous. He owned no great ship. He fought no mighty battles. But every evening, as the sun slipped behind the mountains, he climbed to the same rocky hill. There he would sit quietly, watching his sheep wander through the valley below. One evening, a young traveler asked him, "Why do you come here every day?" The old shepherd smiled. "To remember." The traveler looked around. "Remember what?" The shepherd pointed toward the valley. "The sound of the wind, the smell of pine after rain, the voices of my children when they were small, the first lamb of spring, the last sunset before winter." The things that seem ordinary are often the easiest to forget. The storyteller pauses. The fire crackles softly. Outside, the wind brushes against the turf roof. For a few moments, no one speaks. Even the youngest child seems thoughtful. Perhaps the lesson is simple enough for everyone to understand. The greatest treasures in life are often the quietest ones. The storyteller continues. The young traveler returned many years later. The old shepherd was gone, but every evening, someone else climbed the same hill. It was his grandson, and each evening, he sat quietly, watching the valley below. The traveler smiled. Without speaking, he understood. Some traditions do not survive because they are written down. They survive because someone quietly chooses to continue them. The old man finishes the story. No one applauds, no one needs to. The silence that follows feels complete. Another log settles gently upon the glowing embers. A shower of tiny sparks drifts upward before disappearing into the darkness above. One of the children yawns, another is already asleep, head resting peacefully against a folded cloak. Their breathing has become slow, steady, comfortable. Outside, the stars continue their silent journey across the northern sky. Somewhere beyond the valley, other families sit beside other fires, sharing other stories, different words, different voices, yet perhaps the very same feeling. Across the Viking world, countless ordinary evenings ended just like this, not with celebration, not with excitement, but with warmth, family, myrrh, and the quiet understanding that tomorrow the sun would rise once again. The storyteller leans back. His work, like the day's labor, is finished. Only the fire continues speaking now. Its gentle crackling fills the room, soft, steady, almost like a heartbeat. You close your eyes for a moment. The warmth reaches your face. The smell of pine smoke lingers in the air. The longhouse feels peaceful, safe, timeless. And for a little while, it almost seems as though the outside world has disappeared completely. The fire has grown smaller now. Its bright flames have become glowing embers. Their gentle orange light dances quietly across the wooden walls, painting familiar shadows that have appeared here night after night for generations. Outside, the valley rests beneath a blanket of darkness. The fields, so busy beneath the morning sun, have become silent. The sheep lie close together in their enclosure. The horses stand quietly beneath the open sky. Somewhere near the edge of the forest, an owl calls once. Then, silence returns. Inside the longhouse, the youngest children are already asleep. One still clutches a small carved wooden horse. Another has pulled a wool blanket almost over their face, leaving only a few loose strands of blonde hair visible in the firelight. Their breathing is slow, steady, peaceful. The adults speak only in whispers now. A mother folds the last wool cloak of the day. A father places the family's axe back upon its wooden peg. An older woman checks the fire one final time, adding a single log, just enough to carry warmth through the first hours of the night. These are small acts, so ordinary that no one thinks to remember them. Yet they have been repeated, almost exactly, for countless evenings, across centuries, across generations, and perhaps that is why they matter. History often remembers the extraordinary, the great battles, the famous voyages, the names of kings etched into stone. But history is also built from evenings like this, from bread shared beside quiet fires, from children tucked safely beneath warm blankets, from hands made rough by honest work. Most Viking farmers never sailed across distant oceans. Most never carried swords into battle. Many lived their entire lives within sight of the same hills, the same forest, the same stretch of water. Some might never travel farther than the neighboring valley. And yet, their lives shaped the world around them. They raised children, they planted fields, they repaired homes, they cared for animals through long winters. Without them, there would have been no ships to launch, no towns to grow, no kingdoms to support. The quiet farmer, standing patiently behind history, made history possible. The fire settles lower. A soft shower of glowing sparks rises briefly before disappearing into the darkness above. The smell of pine smoke lingers gently in the air, mixed with drying herbs, fresh wool, and warm timber. It is a scent no modern photograph can capture. Only imagination can bring us here. You think back over the day, the first pale light of dawn, the fresh bread, the damp earth beneath your boots, the quiet rhythm of the loom, the cool shade of the pine forest, children laughing beneath the birch tree, the evening meal, the old storyteller beside the fire. None of these moments were remarkable on their own. Together, they became a life. Perhaps that is true for all of us. Our lives are rarely remembered because of one extraordinary day. They are shaped by thousands of ordinary ones. Outside, the stars continue their silent journey. The same stars that shone above this valley 1,000 years ago. The same stars seen by countless farmers, travelers, children, and grandparents. Generations have come and gone beneath them. Empires have risen and disappeared. Languages have changed. Borders have shifted, yet the stars remain. Patiently watching, you feel grateful, not for witnessing a great battle or standing upon the deck of a famous longship, but for something quieter, for spending one ordinary day with ordinary people. Sometimes, history feels closest when nothing remarkable happens at all. The last conversation fades into silence one by one. Everyone settles onto simple wooden sleeping platforms covered with straw mattresses, soft wool blankets, and warm animal furs. The fire glows quietly nearby, enough to keep the chill away until morning. Outside, the wind whispers softly across the turf roof. The valley sleeps, the forest sleeps. The fjord rests beneath the moonlight, smooth as polished stone. Soon, the first light of another morning will touch these mountains. Another loaf of bread will be baked. Another field will need tending. Another ordinary day will begin. But that day belongs to tomorrow. Tonight, the farm is peaceful. The work is finished. The doors are closed. The family is together. And somewhere, far beyond the centuries, you have quietly become part of their evening. So, as the fire burns gently lower and the stars drift silently overhead, allow your own thoughts to become just as calm, just as steady, just as peaceful. And if sleep has not already found you, perhaps it is only a few quiet moments away. Good night. The longhouse has finally grown quiet. The fire burns gently, its warm glow fading into the darkness. The family sleeps peacefully. Their work is finished. Their tools rest upon the wall. Outside, the valley lies beneath a blanket of stars. If we leave the farm now, very quietly, without waking anyone, and continue walking along the narrow dirt path, another part of the Viking world slowly begins to appear. It is easy to imagine Viking farms as lonely places, standing completely alone beneath the mountains. Some certainly were, but many were not. Across Scandinavia, farms often formed small communities, not villages in the modern sense, with neat streets, shops, and rows of houses. Instead, they were clusters of neighboring farms, each separated by fields, streams, patches of woodland, and rocky hills. A walk of 20 or 30 minutes might bring you to another family, another longhouse, another collection of barns, another hearth glowing gently in the evening. These neighbors depended upon one another. No family, no matter how hardworking, could do everything alone. When a roof collapsed beneath heavy winter snow, Neighbor came to help rebuild it. When hay needed gathering before rain arrived, extra hands appeared. When someone became ill, food might quietly arrive at the door. Life demanded cooperation, not because people were unusually kind, but because survival itself often depended upon it. The landscape encouraged this spirit. Scandinavia is beautiful, but it has never been an easy place to farm. Much of the land is rocky, growing seasons are short, winters can be long. A family facing those challenges entirely alone would struggle. Together, their chances improved. Archaeologists have discovered that many Viking farms were surprisingly prosperous, not extravagant, but comfortable. Excavations reveal carefully built longhouses, well-made tools, storage buildings, animal enclosures, and evidence of generations living in the same place. Some farms remained occupied for hundreds of years. Children were born there, grew old there, and eventually, their own grandchildren inherited the same land. Imagine standing upon that same hillside, generation after generation, watching the same sunrise over the fjord, planting the same fields, walking the same forest paths, repairing the same stone walls. There is something deeply comforting about such continuity. Modern life changes so quickly. Homes, jobs, cities, technology, everything seems to move faster each passing year. The Viking farmer lived differently. Time was measured by harvests, by winters, by lambing season, by the return of migrating birds, by the first flowers pushing through melting snow. Nurture was the calendar, and perhaps that slower rhythm shaped people in ways we can still appreciate today. Even disagreements between neighbors rarely remained private for long. Communities were small, people knew one another. A broken promise, an unpaid debt, or a wandering cow could become the concern of several households. That might sound inconvenient, yet it also meant no one truly disappeared into anonymity. Everyone mattered. Every family contributed something. Some became known for skilled woodworking, others for weaving. Some raised particularly strong horses, others produced excellent cheese or smoked fish. Knowledge spread quietly from farm to farm. One successful idea might slowly travel across an entire valley. Long before books carried information, people carried it themselves. A new way to build a roof, a stronger style of fence, a better method of preserving meat. Small improvements, shared over generations, gradually transformed everyday life. Perhaps the greatest surprise for modern visitors would not be what they saw, but what they heard, or rather, what they did not hear. No engines, no distant traffic, no humming electrical wires, only wind, birdsong, flowing water, the occasional axe striking timber, a sheep calling from the hillside, and somewhere, a child laughing outside a neighboring farm. Silence was never truly silent. It was simply filled with gentler sounds. As dawn approached, smoke would begin rising from dozens of rooftops throughout the valley. One family after another preparing bread, lighting fires, beginning another ordinary day. Each household different, yet all connected by the same landscape, the same seasons, the same hopes, the same quiet determination to build a good life. One day at a time, and perhaps that quiet determination is the true story of the Viking farmer. Not conquest, not glory, not distant voyages, simply the patient work of creating a home that could endure. Thank you for spending this peaceful day on a Viking farm. May your night be calm, your dreams gentle, and your morning unhurried. Well,